Okay. Well, wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. Ajit asked me to kind of MC and facilitate this event, and I was more than happy to do it. So we're going to start with a prayer that will be read by my son, Turner. All right, Turner, you ready?
Yep. O Lord, I'm a child, enable me to grow beneath the shadows of thy loving kindness. I'm a tender plant, cause me to be nurtured throughout the outpourings of thy clouds with thy bounty. I'm a sapling of the garden of love. Make me into a fruitful tree. Thou the mighty, the powerful, thou the loving, the all-knowing, the all-seeing.
Well done, Turner.
Right.
Thank you, buddy. So everyone here probably knows Rainn from his work on the Emmy Award-winning Office, of course. But when I was going over his IMDb list, I noticed a few things that were worth mentioning that Turner would be interested in. Rainn has played Gargamel in the Smurfs, and he has also played Lex Luthor in the DC movies, DC animated movies. If you haven't seen any of the DC animated movies, they are fantastic. They arguably better than any of the live action movies DC makes. They make great movies, the animated ones. So definitely worth checking out. And as a Star Trek, I almost said Star Wars, Star Trek nerd, he played Harry Mudd, which if you watch the original series of Star Trek, you would know that Rainn Wilson as Harry Mudd was a fantastic cast in the new series. And one of his first movies is a movie that if you haven't watched in many years, is worth watching, is Galaxy Quest. He made one of his first appearances. So there's a lot of great things beyond just The Office, which of course is a classic in and of itself. But in addition to all this, Rainn has also did, what was it called? The Idiot's Guide to Climate Change, if I recall, or something like that. He did. He does a wonderful series that with Greta Thunberg is definitely worth a watch. And when he's not busy being on TV and movies, he's at home feeding his animals. Last I heard, he had a couple pigs. How many pigs do you have now, Rainn?
2 pigs, yes.
2 pigs, yes. So
Mhm,
he is an actor and a pig farmer. Any other animals you have right now?
Yeah, we've got a couple of pit bulls, and we've got a peahen, and
Nice.
my wife has a donkey and a zonkey, which is a half zebra, half donkey, and then she's got 2 horses
Nice.
nearby, not at our house, about 12 minutes drive away. So
Wow.
we've got all in all, we do have a menagerie, though, that's for sure.
Nice. You got the beginning of a little arc family right there. So put him on the boat. That's wonderful. Well, that's amazing. That's amazing to hear. So before Rainn starts, I wanted to read one quote to kind of set the tone, because you know, those of you who have followed Rainn Wilson, and if you've ever seen his SoulPancake videos and such, he is a very spiritual person. But as we know, it's been hard to be spiritual lately with all the things that have been going in the world. So I wanted to read this quote from the Baha'i writings. And this was written in 1944, which was at the height of World War II. And Shoghi Effendi wrote this, and he said, "It is true, the Baha'is should try and live a normal, healthy life, but we cannot for a moment overlook the abnormal state of the world. If there had not been believers ready to give their health, comfort, pleasure, everything for the cause in these dark days, the work would not have gone on." So we've been challenged lately. And so it's nice to have somebody like Rainn to come join us and talk about these spiritual topics. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Rainn.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Thanks, Ajit. Very nice to see you all. Hi, everybody. It's funny, I haven't done a Zoom like this in a while, and it feels like it's 2021. It's kind of like, oh, Zoom people, lots of Zoom people talking. Very nice to see you all, and I'm wondering right now. I have 2 two talks I could do, and I want to get a show of hands of which one people want to hear. I'm currently writing a book, and oh wow, I'm looking at these various talks I could do. Oh, here it is. I'm currently just finishing a book called Soul Boom. I'm currently writing a book, and we'll just go ahead and mute whoever that is. I'm going to mute him. I'm currently finishing a book. I'm writing a book called Soul Boom: Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution. And it's inspired by the Baha'i faith, but it's for a mass. It's for a mass audience, and so I've really been in the writing mode of this, and I'm really excited. I'm not quite ready to talk about what's in the book, but I hope we can have another one of these conversations and talk about some things for the book. But basically, I don't have very much prepared. Tonight I have a couple of PowerPoints that I've done before, spoiler alert, and some really exciting topics. But mostly I would love to get in a conversation and just be in a dialogue with all of us. I think that would prove much more fruitful. So I hope that we get to do that later, and I hope you'll consider that. So I'm going to remove spotlight, and then here's what I want to do. So I want to, do you guys know how to do a show of hands? Do you guys know how to raise your hand in this?
Like physically or on some type of Zoom thing?
On a Zoom thing, but it's not letting me. Oh, there it is. Okay. If you click on reactions, you can do, oh, look at all the people who have their hands up. That's great. Very well done. So
thumbs up, yes.
I have two options tonight. I can talk about the meaning of life, and it's a very, like, half an hour. You'll understand the meaning of life. Super fun. The other one is called spiritual life hacks. You know what life hacks are? Like they used to be really big on the internet like 10 years ago, where they'd be like, hey, here's an easy way to clean your computer keyboard. You just take a Post-it note and fold the sticky part and put it in between the keys in your keyboard, and that's a life hack, and it makes your life better, and it's a really simple solution to making your life better. Well, I thought, well, really we should have spiritual life hacks. So I have a talk on spiritual life hacks as well, ways to make your life better. If you could, I'm going to lower people's hands that have left their hands up. Let's have a show of hands. Who wants to talk on the meaning of life? Talk on the meaning of life, hands up. If you can, raise your Zoom hands or raise your regular hand. If you go to reactions and click raise hand at the bottom of your screen, I'm getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Anyone else? Hands up. 11, 12. I'm going to the next page. Oh, those are the same people. Okay. All right. So then, okay, so now put your hands down. And who wants a talk on spiritual life hacks? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would be funny if it was a tie, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be funny? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Who else? Anyone else raise your hand? Anyone else? Is that it? 9. Chris, Paige, Nabil. Okay. All right. It looks like we're going to the meaning of life, 12 to 9. Is that right, Chris? Did I get that right?
Yes, you did. Very good.
All right. All right. Excellent. Okay. So let's see what we got here. I'm going to share the screen. 1 second. All right. Can you see this okay? Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Here's the meaning of life. And again, folks, this is just some crazy ideas, some quotes inspired from the Baha'i faith, some questions, some life's big questions to elicit a conversation, to have an elevated discussion about some big important issues. So I'm going to start us off and chat for a little while, for 20 or 30 minutes on some of these ideas, and then I hope we can have a larger and deeper conversation. Thank you all for coming today. So the one question to start us off when we're like in the meaning of life is, what is the purpose of our physical reality? And why are we here? Why are we alive? So if you're a physicalist or materialist, and I mean this from the second dictionary definition of materialist, which is not someone who covets material things, but someone who believes only in the material universe. So you believe that we were created out of, they believe in science and created out of evolution, and we're essentially monkeys with large brains, and we have consciousness, and it's pure random accident of the universe that we developed this way. And when we die, that's it, lights out, that's the end of the story. There's not any soul or spirit or God or anything like that. There just is a giant empty space with a bunch of stuff in it, a bunch of atoms and molecules. And if you believe in that, then what is the purpose of your physical reality if you believe in that? Well, most likely it's like, well, enjoy it while it lasts, and have a good time, and enjoy yourself and find meaning in whatever gives you meaning. If badminton gives you meaning, then go with that. If your family gives you meaning, go with that. That's pretty much the end of the story. So, but if you are a person of faith and believe in a spiritual dimension to the universe, then where you would see this slightly differently. So let me go to the next quote. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but spiritual beings having a human experience. Père Teilhard de Chardin, he was a father and a philosopher, a Jesuit priest, one of my favorite quotes of all time. And this is essentially the fundamental teaching of all the world's religions, if you're going to boil it down. And here it is said by a Jesuit priest. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. And we're not human beings, by the way, having a human experience. We're not human beings having a physical experience. We are spiritual at our essence. In reality, we are spiritual beings, and we're having a human experience. We're put in these bodies for 80 or 90 years, and we get to make the most of it and develop. Well, we'll get into the meaning of life later on, but whatever that human experience means to you, to me, what does it mean to have a human experience? It means falling in love, creating art, connecting with people, serving others, enjoying nature, appreciating the majesty, beauty, and wonder and awe of the universe. This is part of the human experience. But ultimately, I am a spiritual being and have a spiritual reality. Abdul Baha, whose name I really didn't spell right here, Abdul Baha, for those who don't know, for those few who don't know, is the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah's name means the glory of God. And Abdul Baha, his name means servant of glory. And he was the leader of the Baha'i faith after his father's passing for many decades around the turn of the century. He was an incredibly wise spiritual teacher, and Baha'is looked to him for guidance. So Abdul Baha says, man, the true man, is soul, not body. Though physically man belongs to the animal kingdom, yet his soul lifts him up above the rest of creation. So just getting a little perspective. Abdul Baha also says, man is in reality a spiritual being, and only when he lives in the spirit is he truly happy. So this is an interesting take. You know, we are often looking for happiness in the world, and our slogan and our Bill of Rights is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. People seem to be obsessed with happiness and finding it. And we certainly enjoy life more when we are happy. And when we live in the spirit, we're truly happy. Only when we live in the spirit. So what does that mean to live in the spirit? Maybe that's something we can talk about after this talk. So those are the questions I want to ask you guys. What is a human experience? And what does it mean to live in the spirit? To live in the spirit. Because when we live in the spirit, we're truly happy. So maybe we can talk about that later on, what you think that means. And maybe some experiences that you have living in the spirit and how it made you happy. So now we're getting closer, we're zeroing in on the meaning of life. So if we're going to say that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and that only by living in the spirit are we truly happy, so we're reframing the context that we have a brief amount of time on this physical plane. Baha'is every day say a short obligatory prayer, sometime between noon and sunset. And I know for me as a Baha'i, sometimes it's kind of like, oh, the sun is setting. Oh, crap, I got to say my prayer. And it's a very brief prayer, as you can see. There's 3 sentences. And it is incredibly profound. And every time I say it, I get something new out of it. I get some new kind of meditative connection to the source, some larger source. But contained in this daily prayer that Baha'is say is one of the meanings of life. I bear witness, O my God, that thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee. I testify at this moment to my powerlessness and to thy might, to my poverty and to thy wealth. There is none other God but thee, the help in peril, the self-subsisting. So in that first sentence, thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee. So the question is, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to know and worship God? So I'm going to put that on my list of questions. What does it mean to you to know and worship God? So at first blush, what does that mean? To know God. How do we know God? Well, we know God through his divine teachers. We know him through Jesus and Moses and Muhammad and Baha'u'llah. That's one way to know God. How else can we know God? I think that from a Baha'i perspective, faith and science are in harmony. They're not in opposition. They're actually in harmony. So if we know science, perhaps we know God. Creating art is a way to know God. We know God by getting to know other people and getting to know the divine qualities of God in other people. I mean, there's so much to say on this. We could do a whole, just half an hour of what it means to know God. And at first blush, I mean, like to worship God, what does that mean? It means you pray like this, or you get on your knees, or you you bow down, or you say, Our Father who art in heaven, or you say a prayer, like certainly that is worship. Yeah, that is absolutely worship. But from a Baha'i perspective, that is certainly not the only way to understand worship. There are a number of different ways to understand worship. Here's some quotes to help us understand this a little bit better. He hath known God who hath known himself. This is actually a quote from the Quran, quoted also by Baha'u'llah. What does that mean? That's another one. We can ask that. You know, I've been in therapy for years, getting to know myself better. Is that me knowing God? Kind of. I do know that we all have pieces of God inside of us, in the sense that we have divine virtues that reflect God's light. Those wonderful character traits and qualities that people love in one another: kindness, humility, honesty, compassion. These are the qualities of the divine that are in everyone here. Ajit and Chris and Glenn and everyone else is here. Riaz and Don Karbowski. Well, except Don Karbowski. She doesn't have very many. But other than Don, everyone has those. Work in the spirit of work in the spirit of service is worship in the eyes of God. So that's an interesting quote. So it's a different way to think about worshiping God, other than the prayers and the and whatnot. If we work in service to others, that is worship. Abdul Baha says in a letter to an artist, "What bestowal could be greater than this, that one's art should be even as the act of worshiping the Lord? That is to say, when thy fingers grasp the paintbrush, it is as if thou wert at prayer in the temple." This is a revolutionary concept, and one that I love so much in the Baha'i faith, that the making of art, guys, is worshiping God. So again, at first blush, to know God, okay, I'm going to read the Bible and I'm going to say a prayer, know and worship God. But to know God can mean all kinds of things, and to worship God can mean all kinds of things. So here's another aspect of the meaning of life. Someone was once asking Abdul Baha, should prayer take the form of action? And Abdul Baha says, yes, in the Baha'i cause, arts, sciences, and all crafts are counted as worship. Whoa, that's mind-blowing. Arts, sciences, and all crafts. Even if you make macrame plant holders, that is worship. If it is prompted, here's the if statement, if it is prompted by the highest motives and the will to do service to humanity, this is worship, to serve mankind and to minister to the needs of the people. Service is prayer, a physician ministering to the sick gently, tenderly, free from prejudice, and believing in the solidarity of the human race. He is giving praise. So a very different way to look at prayer, right? Service is prayer. And then there's another question to Abdul Baha. What is the purpose of our lives? And Abdul Baha responded, to acquire virtues. Don't ask me where I got these quotes, because I used to know and I can't remember now. So here's another part of the meaning of life, to acquire virtues. We talked about those special spiritual virtues that everyone has except Dawn. So this is another aspect to the meaning of life. And another quote from Abdul Baha, the purpose of the creation of man. Let's look at that. The purpose of the creation of man is the attainment of the supreme virtues of humanity. So, we've just been told in our obligatory prayer, we have been created to know and worship God. This is different. This is related, but it's a little different. Abdul Baha says, the purpose of the creation of man is the attainment of supreme virtues of humanity. What are those again? All those wonderful virtues we love in people so much when we meet someone. They're wise, they're tender, they're kind, they're filled with loving kindness, they're humble, they're imaginative. All of these wonderful virtues, those are divine virtues in us. Those are not animal virtues. They're higher virtues. Although they're, I have in my pigs and my dogs, they have a lot of wonderful virtues themselves, but that's not exactly the same as what we're talking about. So moving on. So going on with the developing of virtues, Abdul Baha says, in this world, he must prepare himself for the life beyond. That divine world, we're talking about, for lack of a better word, heaven, but it's not really heaven from a Baha'i concept. The Abha kingdom, the kingdom of glory, the plane, the spiritual plane and realms that follow this physical human experience that Père Teilhard de Chardin was discussing. That divine world is manifestly a world of lights. Therefore, man has need of illumination here. That is a world of love. The love of God is essential. It is a world of perfections. Virtues or perfections must be acquired. That world is vivified by the breaths of the Holy Spirit. In this world, we must seek them. That is the kingdom of life everlasting. It must be attained during this vanishing existence. Here's a quote from Shoghi Effendi, who was the grandson of Abdul Baha and was the leader of the Baha'i faith through a good part of the center of the 20th century. From about 1920 to 1960, right in there. The Baha'i faith, like all divine religions, is thus fundamentally mystic in character. Its chief goal is the development of the individual and society through the acquisition of spiritual virtues and powers. I'm going to move on. I'm going to skip this part. Here's another purpose of life. There's a meaning of life, right? That's what we're zeroing in on, the meaning of life. Why were we created? Well, Baha'u'llah gives a different answer. So this is slightly different than what we've been talking about. Number one, to know and worship God. Number two, to acquire virtues. Number three, all men have been created to carry forth an ever-advancing civilization. All men, not some men, not political leaders, all men have been created. And that by men, that's not gender. This was, written in the last century. So men means humans. All humans have been created to carry forth an ever-advancing civilization. That's a good quote to discuss. Ever-advancing civilization. That's going to be my next question for you guys. What does that mean to create an ever-advancing civilization? That can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. To some people, it might mean, oh, I hope my political party wins this current election. To other people, it means, well, people should just have more money. To other people, it means, well, that we just need more development, economic and geographical and real estate development. So let's talk about what that means. And there's a number of other quotes about this ever-advancing civilization. But again, to recap a little bit, to know God and to know thyself. We talked about the meaning of life. We talked about the worshiping of God and how, when we talk about, that's to know God and to worship God. And part of the worship of God is service to others, because work in the spirit of service is worship. And the pursuit of the arts and sciences and crafts is also a way to worship God. We obtain virtues, folks, in preparation for the world of lights, because that's all we're going to take with us. We're not going to take with us this sweatshirt and these AirPods. When we die, we take with us our spiritual virtue, our lights to go into the world of lights. And I skipped the slide on suffering. That's a different talk. And to help create an ever-advancing civilization. So here's 3 ways to look at the meaning of life from a Baha'i perspective. And I always find this very helpful because I'm really like a meat and potatoes guy. Like I'm a very, like, just, it's got a spiritual teachings for me just have to work in my life. They have to be practical to make my life better. I've got to be able to wrap my head around them. I've got to be able to put them into practice. You know, it's like when your bookshelf is tippy and you take a book and you put it under the leg of the bookshelf to study it. Like I'm not, I can't build a bookshelf, but I'm really good at finding the right book to stick under the leg to keep it steady. But I kind of need my spirituality to be in that realm. So I'm kind of like, everyone, oh, I see all these texts. We love Dawn. Stop picking on Dawn. Let me tell you something. Dawn is the worst. And I'm not sure why you invited her here. Mm-hmm. We'll get into that later. So to me, this is really helpful to kind of a helpful reminder, even giving this talk tonight, kind of like, and when I say my noonday prayer every day, when I say my obligatory prayer, like I've been created to know and worship God, that immediately reminds me, okay, what does that mean? If I'm created, how can I know and worship God today? You know, can I know God by really watching a hummingbird? Kind of I can. Can I worship God by just being super, super kind to someone? Yeah. I can look at a hummingbird and I can be kind to someone, and that's knowing and worshiping God. And how can I acquire these spiritual virtues? And how can I help create an ever-advancing civilization? When I put these, because I can get very lost in realms of big ideas, but these ground me. And they're very, very practical. Those are very doable. If you're talking about the meaning of life from a Baha'i perspective, one thing I love about it is like your capacity can be very small. It doesn't matter what you do. You know, if you can be of service and you bring, you know, some, you know, a casserole to someone, and if you want to help usher forth an ever advancing civilization by, you know, organizing a park cleaning in your neighborhood, that's fine. We're not talking about giant global international initiatives. We're talking about every human being and the work that's in front of them. And one of the things Baha'is do, I don't know, it looks like most of you are Baha'is, but I think there are some people who aren't Baha'is here. One of the things Baha'is do is that they do these study groups called Ruhi books. And there's various Ruhi books. And one of them is we do service projects by teaching children's classes and teaching them about the spiritual virtues that I mentioned earlier. So the spiritual virtues that we're trying to develop, we need to teach our children to try and develop those virtues as well. And just start that education really young so that our kids are able to recognize compassion and honesty and kindness and humility in people that they meet. Book 5 is about working with junior youth and this kind of really misunderstood, much maligned age group from like 12 to 15. And when you study that book and you study how to learn how to work with junior youth and serve junior youth and teach junior youth and do service projects with junior youth, etc., there's a really beautiful concept that's illumined in that book, which is called the twofold moral path. And we all have this twofold path, and this is one of the things that's in my book that I'm very excited to share with people. So many of Baha'i, basically in my book, I just stole a bunch of Baha'i ideas and try and take credit for them. And that is, our twofold path is that we have this path to making ourselves better and more spiritual. So that's the development of our virtues. And then the other moral path that we have is to try and make the world a better place. And so we have both of these things going on at the same time, right? So we learn about this in book 5, and this is a wonderful thing to instill in the youth that we're working with. Like, hey, where are we on our moral path? Are you making yourself better in this action, in this meditation, in this prayer, in this service project? And when you do a service project, you're also making yourself better, and you're also helping others and making the world a better place. And by making the world a better place, you're making yourself a better person. And as you become a better and better person, you're more able to make the world a better place. So there's a twofold moral path. So that is a really important thing to understand when we look at this meaning of life, that the Baha'i idea of knowing and worshiping God, of creating and cultivating, divine virtues inside of us, and then ushering forth, ever creating an ever advancing civilization, that we're on this twofold moral path. We're doing both things at the same time. So it's juggling a number of balls, but I love how simple it is, how plain it is, how clear it is. It allows me to latch onto something and kind of and focus on what gives our lives meaning. So that's pretty much it that I wanted to share, and I would really love to have a conversation. So I have a bunch of these questions in front of us, and I'd love to hear your answers on some of them, or your ideas on some of them. I would love to really offer the Zoom floor, as it were, more to the folks that aren't Baha'is, to give a chance to hear from you, get to know you, see you, say hello to you. And I don't want to, shut the Baha'is up, but I'd always love to hear from the Baha'is, but I'd love to just offer the floor to this conversation. So going back to my questions, Père Teilhard de Chardin, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Like, what does that mean to you? And what is that human experience? What does it mean to live in the spirit? Abdul Baha says, only when we live in the spirit are we truly happy, because we're spiritual beings. What does that mean to you to live in the spirit? What does it mean to you to know and worship God? Because there's so many different ways to go down that road, to experience that. And what does it mean to usher forth an ever-advancing civilization? Like, what does that mean to you? An ever-advancing civilization. Yeah, so does anyone want to raise their hand? Anyone want to tackle any of these questions, or have any questions for me, or any questions about the Baha'i faith, or share any thoughts on those questions?
Real quick, for those who are not Baha'is that may have been invited, what's the best way is it better to do a Zoom like hand raise or a wave, or what's the best way to say, I have a question, for those who are not here, maybe hesitant?
Yeah, I think the raise hand option under reactions would be great. But if I see you doing this, I'm going to look for that as well and try and bring you on. So whichever.
I know I've invited a few people personally, but others may have as well, may not know. So
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, either way. So you can use the raise hand function, or you can just wave wildly at the screen. Anyone, any thoughts? Don't be shy. Come on. Drizel Cedarquist is here. One of my favorite names of all time, by the way, top 10 names, and one of my favorite books on Baha'u'llah, author of one of my very favorite books of Baha'u'llah. I'm forgetting the name right now, but hello. Ms. Cedarquist, big fan, longtime reader, and nice to see you.
I'm working on the Abdul Baha book, but progressing slowly. So I'm glad to hear you've got another book coming out. And I appreciate that you're reminding us that there is a range of things that we can do to live this spiritual life. Oops, I lost you. Where did you go?
I'm right here. Here, okay. I'm going to spotlight myself.
Ah, okay. Well, I like to see those other people too. But
there we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, that you can bring a casserole to a friend and be kind, and in fact, actually, in these days of, some of us are still in the pandemic portion of the post-pandemic world here, so that in itself can be you know, I like new behaviors as we get back out into the world and try to, you know, I'm at the point of just doing something in the park. I got a couple of new folding chairs for sitting outside and I got a date with a neighbor. We can sit outside and talk to one another and see where those opportunities are to just elevate the conversation, include some spiritual conversation too.
Yeah, that's a great service and a great way to even usher forth an ever-advancing civilization, is just to engage in an elevated conversation and bring spirituality into it. I mean, that's great, and it can be as simple as that. That's wonderful. Thank you. Nice to see you. And Avril.
Hey, Rainn, it's Avril. And
Avril.
Thanks for doing this. And I'm so glad the vote went like it did. It was close, but I'm glad that we're talking about this. I mean, and this one thing I wanted to ask you about is, it's always been sort of a stumbling block for me, and I've been a Baha'i just pretty much 20 years now. But this notion in the obligatory prayer that you mentioned, that God wants to be worshipped, has always been a stumbling block for me, because it just doesn't feel like a divine virtue to want to be worshipped. You know what I mean? And so the ways in which we define worship are key, right? That becomes very critical, and not just that we're just bowing and scraping and you know, God didn't create, I don't think, a planet of beings just so that they could flatter him.
Right.
And so I still struggle with that from time to time, just the whole idea of worship. So I'd love to hear any additional thoughts you might have around that. But I really appreciated the broadening of the definition, so that really, the service to other people is the worship. And it's not just words and songs and gestures and symbols that we go through.
That's a really excellent question. And sometimes it's one that I struggle with myself. And I thank you for asking it. Sometimes you kind of feel like there's all this stuff of like, God wants to be worshipped, etc. And like, well, was God why is he so egotistical and he needs everyone to worship him all the time? Like, okay, we get it. You're God.
So needy,
man. But I think you hit, I'll just share one thing, and I'd love to hear from other folks on this as well. But I'll share one thing, which is, I'll share two things. One is that I think you hit the nail on the head with the idea of like, what does that mean to worship God? If man is created to worship God, but then worship God means creating arts and sciences and working in the arts and sciences, and worshiping God means service to others, then we were created to make arts and sciences and to serve each other. You know, that's very different than kind of the kind of bowing that you're talking about. But someone One metaphor that I really love around this is, it is in the, have you ever seen those time-lapse videos of a field of sunflowers and the sun moves across the sky and like the sunflowers, like little satellite dishes all turn towards the sun?
Yeah.
It's in the nature of the sunflower to turn toward the sun. It's best for the sunflower to do it. It is in its nature to do it. It is natural to do it. It is, the sunflower is filled with photosynthesis. It grows 8 feet tall. It creates sunflower seeds that we can eat. And there is something just beautiful and primal and glorious about a field of sunflowers turned towards the sun. And I think the worship of God can be thought of as that way, in that way, that it's beautiful and natural and good for us, and we grow from it to be in a relationship like a sunflower in the sun, to be turning towards the divine light, to just be focusing on the divine light. And that allows us to grow, to connect, to thrive, to find happiness, because only when man lives in the spirit is he happy. So that's another way of looking at it that I enjoy pondering.
Yeah, and I mean that. I think that's a great metaphor, because it shows that it's so in our nature to worship things, and for so long we worshiped idols, or we worshiped ancestors, or we worshiped animals. That seems to be a part of our, I guess, of our DNA. Maybe the emphasis on worshiping God is just the assumption that we're going to worship something, and so that thing should be done. Thanks again.
Thanks, Avril. Ajit?
There's a wonderful passage in the New Testament book of Matthew. I think it's chapter 25, and it's the last few verses, where Jesus is portrayed as the king. And the king says to his followers, I was in prison, you didn't come to see me. I was naked, you didn't provide me with clothes. I was a refugee, and you didn't help me. I was hungry, you didn't feed me. And his followers say to the king, Lord, when did we do this to you? And he says, what you have done to the least of my creatures, you have done unto me. Essentially saying that your service to the poor, the hungry, the imprisoned, the refugee, etc., is service to God. And I've always thought of worshiping God in that sense, is work is worship, but work in the interest of humanity, helping others less fortunate is part of your worship.
That's really beautifully said. Thank you. It's profound. I hadn't heard that story used in that context before. Thank you very much. Glenn and Glenn's friend, whoever you are.
Sorry, his wife, because somebody forgets sometimes to put Glenn and Aaron.
Yeah.
So, hi.
Hello. Hi.
Actually, first off, thank you. We talked to you last year, and we loved your last Zoom with us. So thank you for that. It was great. After your father passed, rest his soul, it was a wonderful conversation that he had about his mother's passing. So thank you. So tonight, I call God give me a poke is a nigging or something's like poke, 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 poke. And why do we invite certain people or anything else? So tonight, a good friend of mine, as well as my brother-in-law are here, non-Baha'is. My brother-in-law is actually a Christian pastor, youth pastor, and he's wonderful. I love him to death. We've had a very generalized discussion. I know they're not the only non-Baha'is here. And we talked about how we have connections to God and things through art and service, everything else. For the non-Baha'is here, would you be able to say from your words how, at least I say, that we believe all faiths in connection to God, all the manifestations are correct, but how we serve God in each person is still also good. That's why I can go to temple, I can go to service, I can go to everything and worship God. I can help people, and I'm still worshiping God. What's the connection for the non-Baha'is who have different faiths, perhaps, to I'm struggling for words, honestly, but
How does it all connect?
how does it all connect? We talked about all the different ways we can serve God through art, through service, through kindness, everything else. Can you describe to him what the thread is through other faiths and why they're all wonderful and good and correct?
Sure. Well, you said it pretty well yourself right there. So I'll just reiterate kind of what you're saying from a Baha'i perspective. All of these incredible spiritual teachers, including the Son of God, Lord Jesus Christ, um, bring incredibly beautiful and powerful teachings down to earth, and they're all coming from the same source. They're all coming from the one true God, the Father. And whether that's the Buddha or Muhammad or Lord Krishna or Moses or dozens and hundreds of indigenous prophets and manifestations that, because there's not a written language, we have lost track of. So members of those faith traditions worshiping God in their own way, and it can be making an offering in a Buddhist or Hindu tradition. It can be, praying to Jesus in a personal prayer in Christianity. It can be bowing 5 times to Mecca. And every faith tradition also has service to the poor and service to others as part of its DNA. And every religious faith also has the idea of us struggling and trying to and endeavoring to become deeper and more beautiful, gentle, and wise human beings. So all of what I'm talking about, about the meaning of life, is not just for Baha'is. It is for people of all faiths and people of no faith. People with no faith can still get to know God in service, in creation of arts and sciences and crafts, in all kinds of different ways. So that's why it's really wonderful, because we're not talking about anyone being damned for not taking a certain path, but we're talking, all of us, about being spiritual beings having a human experience. And that's what it means to live in the spirit, in my mind.
If you
Thank
ever
you
meet
very much.
adding, I actually have told a lot of people that I at least feel that because we have many faiths, we have many manifestations, that God knows where you're at and knows the best way to reach you. And whether you're a Buddhist, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Baha'i, it's the best way to reach you and reach your heart. Whatever your beliefs are, God knows what the best way is to connect with you and when and how.
Yeah, that's very well said. Beautiful. Thank you very much. We're going to go to Amelia, and someone else asked, Linda Odell wanted to say something. And then it looks like we have a question from Faith, who's watching on YouTube. So we'll go with Amelia first.
See.
Hello.
Oh, there. Hi, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. First of
Sure.
all, we love Dawn, so quit picking on. But other than that, you've been talking about God a lot in this talk is about spirituality, and maybe not everyone is coming from the same concept of what is God. So I was wondering if you could describe to us, from a Baha'i point of view, when we talk about God, what do we mean? I will leave that up to you. And thank you again for doing these talks. They're awesome.
That's a big question. The nature of God, that's another 2-hour
I know, our creator, the
conversation.
unknowable essence, all of that. But I just want to, how is
No,
it?
it's true. It's true. So in my book, I have a chapter called The Notorious God, and it's all about kind of reinventing God and really examining what we mean when we say God, like what we talk about when we talk about God. What are we referring to? And it is a very complicated conversation and an in-depth one and a multifaceted one to unpack. But essentially, you mentioned the creator, you mentioned the unknowable essence. And that's an interesting point that I left out of my talk, and I usually bring it up, which is if we're created to know and worship God, and then Baha'u'llah's main title for God is the unknowable essence. That doesn't make any sense. We've been created to know something that we can't know. That's crazy talk. So there's another kind of mystical spiritual conundrum in the middle of this, to know something that is ultimately unknowable. But I'll tell you just from the get-go, here's what we all know God is not. He is not white. He is not a man. He does not have a beard. He does not sit on a cloud. In fact, this is a big stumbling block for people, because for centuries and centuries, God was an old white man, similar to Santa Claus, looking down on us, judging who's naughty and nice. And God was judgmental and then cast disbelievers into hell. And I don't think that we believe in that kind of I call him Sky Daddy. He's not a Sky Daddy. And the point of the chapter is ultimately where I arrive is like, would it be possible for us to think about God more as in a similar way that we think about music, or in a way that we think about love, or in a way that we think about beauty? So not a being, not a there's a word called demiurge. A demiurge is literally like an all-powerful being who's up above, kind of throwing lightning bolts down and meddling in affairs and with superpowers, kind of like a Marvel superhero, but less of an entity and more of a unifying concept that is ultimately ungraspable, like beauty. If you say to someone, prove that love exists, it's impossible. You can't prove that love exists. Like, you've got two people are in love, and you could do a brain scan and you could see parts of their brain lighting up, but that's not proof that there's love. But yet everyone who has felt love has really experienced it, and it is just as real as this dish towel. But it's completely unprovable. So that's another way to think about God. I think when the hippies in the 60s talked about God is love, I think they were really onto something. So there's a lot more to be said on that, but thank you very much for your question. Let's move on to Linda Odell. Hi, Linda.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Rainn, for doing this. Thank you, Ajit, for putting on these programs monthly. They're very helpful. I'm just thinking about April's question about worship and the prayer, the obligatory prayer that says we are to know God and to worship Him. To me, the more we know of God, of which is not a lot, but we know through our faith, whether it's Christian or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist, we know through our faith the leaders who help us to know Him better. We also know this by studying these leaders and their writings, and those writings tell us about God. And in doing so, it allows us to recognize those virtues of God that as believers, I believe we're to incorporate into our own lives. You had said earlier about our purpose for being here. Is to develop those virtues that will carry us over to the next plane. And the more we know about God through our prophets, through Baha'u'llah, through Jesus Christ, through Muhammad, whoever it is we believe to be the person that is of God, then the more we're able to develop those virtues. And in developing those virtues, we talk about, I'm in book 10 now of the Rui, building community. The more in my mind's eye, the more we learn, develop, and act with these virtues, the more we're able to walk that path towards Baha'u'llah's vision of world unity and invite friends to join us on this path. So.
That's very well said. Very, very well said. Yeah. And that's a great way. You kind of tied it all together in a really beautiful way. Thank you very much. That's great. That's really, really pretty profound. Thank you so much. I'm going to read a couple of comments. Nabil Yazdani says, I think another way to say it is it pleases God to worship because one of the components of worship is mindfulness, and this benefits us. Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Sorry, Rainn, that's from YouTube Watcher.
Yes.
I was just copying and pasting.
Yep. And YouTube Watcher Cynthia said, spiritual love is reciprocal, equals service to humanity, is prayer, worship of God. Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah. And I do think that it benefits us to worship God, because when we're talking about all of these aspects of worshiping God, mindfulness, meditation, there's a wonderful book by Annie Lamott, who's one of my favorite authors, and she's a Christian, and it's called Please, Thanks, Wow. And it's about prayer. And she says those are the three prayers, and I love that. Please, thanks, wow. You're asking for something, you're thanking for something, or you're just saying wow. Like, wow, life is incredible. The world is incredible, or what have you. So, and then Nabil said something else. I see, from Faith. Okay, Nabil. Aaron on YouTube said, the reframing of God is so important. Yes. So many of us, including the past me, are so turned off by the typical Western version of the God Daddy. I can't wait to read about the notorious God. And yeah, it's such a big stumbling block for so many people. They can't even think about a spiritual path. They can't even, okay, because there's a difference, right, between spirituality and religion, right? So spirituality is nurturing a spiritual part of ourselves, and no matter what your faith, and a religion is a kind of set of practices and beliefs, and with a goal in mind. But so many people can't even go on a spiritual path because their concept of God is so difficult for them to wrap their heads and their hearts around, and then let alone to be thinking about a possible religious path. So it's a big deal. So I'm going to go to Gita here in a minute, but again, before we finish up, just a reminder of some of the questions I had. What does it mean to be having a spiritual being having a human experience? Abdul Baha says in reality, we are spiritual beings, and only by living in the spirit are we happy. What does that mean to live in the spirit to you? I'd love to know just personally. What does that mean? And what does it mean to create an ever-advancing civilization? What is Baha'u'llah talking about? So that's what a lot of Baha'is are in conversation about, an ever-advancing civilization. And maybe even here, that's a good thing to hear from the Baha'is about. What are Baha'is doing? Like, what are they actually doing? Not theoretically, what they're theorizing about. What are they actually doing? Boots on the ground, meat and potatoes, where the rubber hits the road. What are Baha'is doing to create an ever-advancing civilization? And Gita was there, and then Gita disappeared. Gita, do you still want to say hello?
Yes, of course. But I think we talked a lot about worshiping God, what means, what does that mean? So I'll just refrain.
Okay, well, thanks for saying hi. No problem. Thank you so much. Anyone else like to raise a hand? Yeah, anyone?
Ajit does.
He's doing the traditional wave. Ajit.
Okay, Ajit.
To me, what the Baha'is are doing, I hope, is to work on creating a more just and equitable society. Not just necessarily for us here in America, but for the rest of the world. So there is more equity, more equality, more justice. We're working on advancing the place women hold in the world. We are working on advancing the unity of all the races and cultures, ethnicities that come together. And coming from India, being from that continent, some of the most amazing things that go on there in the Baha'i community is the number of schools that Baha'is provide. I unfortunately grew up going to a Catholic school because that's all, the good schools were all Catholic. But in India nowadays, the Baha'i schools are becoming well known as schools that people want to go to. And we are providing free education and free vocational training to the masses in India. So at least that's what I'm aware of, what we're doing. And that goes on all around the world in the third world countries. Every place you go, there's a Baha'i school providing free education.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ajit. Anyone else? John Hawkness says, separating the human God, which maybe fundamentalism can promote, like worshiping David Koresh or something. God is all-knowing, omnipotent, omniscient. God only loves us, guiding us to the best of us. God has no need of worship. For us, God is love. Wasting our time by idol worship would be our idea, not God's. Very well said. And then Brian Norfleet on YouTube said, Rainn, I have a question. How do you keep your spirituality in a place like LA with all the materialism there? How do you keep your faith? And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's tough everywhere. I mean, I worked for a while with insurance brokers, and they were the most materialistic, venal, backstabbing, horrible people I'd ever worked with in my life. So the insurance brokerage industry is far worse than my experience in Hollywood. At least Hollywood, there's a lot of people just trying to tell really good stories and important stories and interesting stories and human stories. There's a lot of people trying to do that. But yeah, I mean, I struggle with that myself. I struggle with Hollywood is very status oriented. So it's kind of like if you're hot and if your career is taking off and what projects are being offered to you, what doors are being opened. And it's very easy to get swept up into that. It's a place of a lot of big egos. Keeping ego in check is often very difficult as well. So it's a struggle, but I think it can be wherever you are in the world. We all have our struggles. Also, a little bird told me that it's Ajit's birthday. Happy birthday, Ajit. When I was a kid, we would go to Baha'i summer camp, and they would always sing this song, and I'm going to sing it for you, Ajit. Happy birthday, happy birthday, this is your day to have a lot of fun, boom, boom, boom. Happy birthday, happy birthday, this is your day to have a lot of fun. I hope you're having a lot of fun, Ajit.
Name the little bird, please. Was it Shadi? Who was it?
I'm not telling.
Okay.
I'm not telling.
Facebook's terrible at telling people's birthdays. So would it be appropriate to say, since we don't know your song, Rainn, can we do a normal happy birthday altogether?
Yeah, that won't work though, because it's Zoom and everyone will be off. We can all sing it muted.
Are they ever actually on time?
We can't all talk at the same time. But...
It's fine. I get it. It's funny. Anyway,
it'll all be a second and a half off, but I welcome you to record it and send it to Ajit. But
Fair enough.
any last questions or comments before we wrap this up, folks?
There's a question online that says the human being is intrinsically noble with a soul that has the capacity to seek knowledge, understanding, and a mystical connection with its creator. A human purpose is to develop spirituality by living life in service to others. That's from Tayyebe. That's very nice.
Thank you very much. Very nice. Thank you so much. Nikolai, can you unmute? And it looks like you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Hi, Rainn. Hello?
Hello.
You there?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, I can. Please.
Hey, hi there, Rainn. I had just a quick question. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and recently I listened to one maybe you're familiar with called How to Be a Better Human Being. One of the most recent episodes talked about, I guess, the social conversation going around right now about gender equality. And they had a really interesting take on including diversity and how even diversity sometimes isn't enough without equity alongside that. Is there a better way to have this cohesion between spiritual and religious organizations and sort of the structural enterprises of, big businesses who try and push sort of these plans, these training systems in place to try and, generate dialogue and common understanding among topics such as race, such as equality, such as gender diversity and inclusion? It just seems to be that there's a sort of a disparity between these two. Like a lot of people on the religious side might preach for a very specific angle of how to handle things. And then on the business side, there might be a very strict angle on, I don't know, like a boardroom meeting planning aspect of it. And I think there needs to be some sort of balance in between those two.
Thank you. Really great comments. A really interesting question and a difficult one. The first thing that comes to mind for me is that there seems to be a dichotomy between what a spiritual path wants for us and what oftentimes a capitalist, materialist business path wants for us. Now, businesses are not necessarily all evil. In the best of cases, there's a business provides a service, a valuable service. It employs people, which they feed their families. They gain valuable skills. It works in its community. There's a lot of positive things that can be in a business, but businesses have profit as their bottom line. So if you have a board that wants its CEO to have profit 4 quarters out of the year at all costs, that's not necessarily what's best for human development or an ever-advancing civilization. And you're talking about that kind of like that, and that's one of the something that's in my book, which is this kind of imbalance that's in the world between what business and government want and what we want on a spiritual path. And if we are spiritual beings having a human experience, what that's like. As far as social justice issues and identity issues, I will just say that, again, if we recognize that we're all spiritual beings having a human experience, then that's central to this. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is. It doesn't matter what your race is. It doesn't matter how much money you have. We are all spiritual beings. We're all God's children. And we all need to work in service to one another. So And I love that quote, that idea that diversity is not enough. We need diversity and we need equity. So how do we achieve that equity? You know, some would say, well, it's purely a political way to acquire equity, to achieve equity. That it's only going to be achieved through taxation, for instance, and more social programs. And sometimes that can really help, but I don't believe that ultimately humanity, all 7 billion of us, achieves true equity until we recognize our universal spiritual commonality. And we are living in service as one human family and to each other. So it's super important to be passing just laws that protect the poor and the disenfranchised, people that are oppressed. But we do need it to walk a spiritual path for the ultimate healing, to build an ever-advancing civilization.
And the more we talk about it, elevated conversation, we can't read each other's minds. So we need more speaking. We need more talking.
Yeah. We need to be having these conversations. That's great. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Asking for my friend who is interested in the Baha'i friend, do we really have free will if God has a plan for us? Wait, that's a tough one. That's beyond my capabilities. You'd have to talk to a philosopher. But that's a tricky one. If God is all-knowing and all-powerful and omniscient and has given us free will, if I decide to do this with my hand, am I really doing that with my hand, or does God know that I'm going to do that with my hand, making me do that with my hand? That is one that has puzzled theologians and philosophers for centuries. So good luck with it is all I have to say. Let's go with Glenn.
Mute.
Just have Aaron.
Sorry, hold on, working on it.
Stop. Take your finger off.
What was the question? No. What was the question?
I don't know, but they're waiting.
It's fine. It's on.
Can't hear it.
Sorry, technical difficulties.
That's okay, Glenn and Aaron. We'll get back to you later on. Thank you so much. Matt Gianni, did you have your hand up? Do you have a question or a thought?
I did. Hi, Rainn. I regret I've missed a little bit of the talk because I was putting my own children down, but it sounds like one of the questions you posed to the audience is, how can we contribute to the advancement of civilization? I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the role of kind of raising kids and other kind of activities where we're providing for the education of children, and how that can advance civilization as well from a Baha'i perspective.
Certainly, great question. And so much of building, Ajit was talking about education, but so much about building an ever-advancing civilization begins with our children and our youth, teaching them the divine spiritual virtues, which is something we talked about a great deal early on, and instilling in them a love of service and putting service to others above comfort, profit, and material gain. So this is what we would call like a divine education or a spiritual education. And it's the bedrock of social transformation. So super, super important. Thanks so much for bringing that up. And then someone says, Alicia says, do you have anything I could consider thinking about coming from someone who does think we are all just made of molecules and atoms and go to a dark place after we pass? Haha, thanks, Rainn. I was invited by Aaron. This was a great thing to be a part of. Thanks so much, Alicia. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of friends that are materialist, atheists, physicalists. Some atheists are agnostic and think that we're a random happenstance of the right kind of molecules bumping into each other at the right time, and then us having consciousness. And I get into this in my book, and it's one of my favorite topics. And And I guess there's a couple of, well, let's just go with consciousness. So there's three main question marks in the universe. One is the Big Bang. One is the origin of life on Earth, which is one people don't really talk about very much. We think about like, okay, there's water and there's hydrogen and helium and there's, all the different elements on the planet. Well, then how do you go from that to the first microorganism or paramecium or bacteria or amoeba or whatever? That's a giant jump. But the third one is consciousness. So to me, the miracle of life is consciousness. The fact that we're having this conversation, that we that we fall in love, that we sing, that we create operas. This really stumps scientists, and they really have tried to go through backflips trying to explain consciousness, because there's no evolutionary reason why we should have consciousness. It does not serve us. We don't need it. We could just be slightly smarter apes and not write operas and fall in love and write poetry and weep at sunsets and have memories and have this incredible 3D multidimensional cinematic experience of being a human being on this planet. We don't need it evolutionarily. We absolutely don't. But we have it. So is that an accident, or is that evidence of some greater consciousness at work? So to me, I love this idea that David Chalmers, the physicist and philosopher from Australia, calls it the hard problem of consciousness. Explaining why we have it and where we have it and how it works, because it's not our brains. There's I forget the little boy's name, but you can look him up. There's a little boy in the UK who was born essentially without a brain, and he's conscious. He just had a tiny chunk of brain matter in there, and he has speech. He's growing at essentially a grade level. It's an astonishing story. I can't remember his name to tell you to Google him, but scientists can't figure it out. It is a great mystery, and to me, it is evidence of some greater purpose, some greater mystery beyond molecules and science. Folks, thank you so much. I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back over to our delightful hosts. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a real pleasure. Let's do it again soon. And God bless the great state of Texas.
Well, thank you so much, Rainn, for coming in and joining us. It's always a pleasure. And particularly thank you for Ajit for organizing this. And thank you for everyone for coming and joining us. Just a reminder that next month we have Jack McLean coming to talk about the writings of Shoghi Effendi, which should be very interesting. We start out with a little quote from Shoghi Effendi before, so that should be very interesting. What's the exact date for that one, Ajit? That is Friday, November 4th, right? Excellent. So Friday,
Thank you, dear friends. I really, truly, there was about, between YouTube and Zoom, there's about 60 people that showed up tonight. So that's wonderful. I'm also amazed that Amos didn't make any comment or ask any questions. But it's good to see you all. And again, thank you to Chris and Nabil for all your help making this thing happen. And see you guys soon. Some of you I'll see tomorrow morning.
And we all love Dawn. Yes, we love Dawn, and Dawn is great, and everyone should be very nice to Dawn. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
You, Rainn.
Thank you. Rainn met you at summer school. I think that's why he remembers you.
Maybe so.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Happy birthday, Dad.
Night.
Thank you, Matt. Love you.
Thank you.
Love you.
Happy birthday.